It's the Big E Sports Extravaganza.
It's a tradition.
Your weekly destination for all things going on in the sports universe. We don't just talk X's and O's. We go beyond them. Bringing you some of the most engaging guests from around the nation. Fasten your seatbelts. It's showtime. Now, here's your hostess with the mostest, Elissa Walker-Campbell.
Hey, Elissa Walker-Campbell, I want to welcome you back to the Big E Sports Show. And today we're being joined by one of the most respected minds in professional basketball. Our guest has spent more than 4 decades in the NBA as a scout, coach, and executive, helping shape teams, mentor players, and influence the culture of the game itself. Now he's sharing the stories and lessons that in his remarkable journey in his new book, it is titled Courts of Justice, a powerful reflection on leadership, basketball, and the role sports can play in advancing character, mentorship, and most importantly, social change. It is a true pleasure to welcome veteran NBA executive and author, first time on the show, and that is Mr. Pete Babcock. Hello, Pete.
How are you today?
Hey, I'm doing great. Excited to have this opportunity to catch up with you. And we've got a lot of amazing things that we're going to take a deep dive on. But, before the front offices and scouting reports and being in an executive role in the NBA, take us back to the beginning. I'd love to hear just, what sparked your love for the game of basketball growing up?
Well, I never played. I didn't play. I was a late start in basketball. I didn't play until I was a freshman in high school. But I fell in love with the game immediately. Great coaches in high school, and just they inspired me to, work on my game. And I was an overachieving player. I was never a great player. And played in junior college for a couple of years and then a non-pro league for a couple of years after that. But I always loved the game and I always was fascinated with the NBA, but I had no idea how to get to the NBA. I started my career as a high school coach and enjoyed every minute of it. Coached 9 years in high school and still keep in touch with a lot of my former players. But I had this desire, this interest in the NBA, and I was in Phoenix, Arizona, coaching high school basketball, and the Phoenix Suns had come to town as an expansion team in 1968. I go down and watch the games and just think to myself, if I could do anything in the world, this is what it would be. But no, had no idea how to get there. So I thought I should study the leagues. I bought a videotape machine back when they first came out, the great big monster units and with big tapes. Yeah. I started recording every NBA game I possibly could record, and then I would break the tapes down. I'd study the tapes. I would chart their offensive sets and out of bounds plays. I'd write reports on players, strengths and weaknesses of players, just for myself. It was like a self-education project, and I did that for a whole season while I was coaching in high school. And then at the end of the year, I had this file cabinet full of all these files that I built. And I thought, well, the teams that would know if they were any good at all would be the teams themselves. So this is before computers or emails. So I just wrote a letter to each GM and head coach that I had a report on. And I said in the letter, and you don't know me. I'm a high school coach out of Arizona. But here's a report I wrote on your team. If you think there's any validity to this report, I'd love to scout for free for you. It won't cost you a penny. I'll go down and scout Phoenix Suns games, scout their opponents, write a report for you, mail it to you. It won't cost you anything. Most teams didn't write back. Some teams were nice enough to write me nice notes back and say thanks, but no thanks. The New Orleans Jazz wrote back and said, if I wanted to scout for free, they didn't have much of a scouting budget, so I could go ahead and scout for them. So I spent 2 years scouting for the Jazz. Elgin Baylor was the head coach.
Oh, yeah.
Bill Burka was the GM at that time. And Bill Burka was unbelievable with me. I'd write my reports, mail them to him. He'd critique the reports for me, and I'd make my mistakes, and he helped me improve. And after 2 years of doing that, I had an opportunity to go to work as a part-time scout with the Lakers and did that. And then 2 years after that, the Bucks hired me as a regional scout. And 2 years after that, Paul Silas hired me to be one of his assistant coaches with the old San Diego Clippers. Then from there, just things kind of took off.
Listening to you, I mean, you obviously were ahead of your time, and every successful career has people behind the scenes that, cheer you on and give you guidance. Who was that particular point person in your life? As you were talking about, you were a longtime high school coach and you were just trying to figure out a way to get to the NBA.
Well, Berka was one of the first people to spend a lot of time. My high school coaches were terrific and inspirational and encouraging. And also I was very fortunate to play for really good coaches in high school. And then Bill Berka gave me the first opportunity and helped me kind of learn the craft a little bit more sophisticated manner. And then Paul Silas was brave enough to hire a high school coach to be one of his assistant coaches. I used to ask him, like, why did you decide to hire me versus like former NBA players that you interviewed? And he said, I covered the base of being the former player. I didn't need another former player on the bench with me. I need somebody who had organizational skills, could organize practice schedules, who could break the game down. He liked my reports and all that, and recommendations I got from Paul Westphal and Don Nelson, who I'd worked with previously. Anyway, he gave me opportunities, and then it was never ending. Wayne Embry to this day is one of my best friends and was a mentor to me. There's so many people that influenced my career. So I was pretty fortunate.
And could you ever have imagined that this would, lead to a career that would span more than 4 decades in the NBA? I mean, that's some serious longevity, Pete.
Yeah, I mean, I never, when it started, I actually was having a great time at each stage of the development.
Right. When
I was a volunteer and coach in high school, I was having a great time. I loved it. And then when I was a part-time scout, I loved it. And then, when I was coaching with Paul Silas as one of his assistants, I loved doing that. And then I had an opportunity to move in the front office a few years later in San Diego, and I took that opportunity and then became the GM there. And then, spent years in Denver as a GM, and then Atlanta. And every stage, I had such a great time. It just was like, it wasn't like going to work. I was living my dream, basically, and doing something I had a passion for. So I never felt like I had a real job.
You're listening to The Voice veteran NBA executive and author Pete Babcock, and we're going to shift gears a bit, and we're going to shine the spotlight on your new book, which is titled Courts of Justice. And we've already highlighted 4 decades in the NBA. Just when you reflect, as we're talking about on this journey, these experiences, how it shaped your leadership and philosophy, what did you share in your new book, Courts of Justice?
Well, the reason I wanted to get the book out was I wanted to help share the stories, not only my unlikely journey from going from high school coaching to the NBA, but I wanted to tell the story about how we developed a philosophy of trying to use the game as a vehicle to reach the underserved communities in the various cities where we worked. But I also wanted to shine a light on the pioneers who laid the groundwork for players and coaches today in the NBA. And so the first half of the book covers the history of black basketball and tells the story of how actually black basketball became integrated prior to white. So they had black leagues and white leagues.
Right.
The black leagues actually integrated before the white leagues did, and how the game became a vehicle for integration and bringing races together and breaking down barriers, and just became a huge part, really, of the civil rights movement. So I wanted to tell that story. And then I have a really good friend who was Red Auerbach's biographer, and he's 93 years old now and has published like 45, 46 books. And he said, I'm going to gift you some stories that have never been written before. And I said, well, what are you talking about? He said, when I was writing Red's books, one of the things I asked him was, like, how did you ever make a decision to draft the first black player in the NBA? What went through your mind at that time? And so Red told my friend, whose name is Ken Dooley, he said, I'll tell you the whole story, the whole backstory, but you can never write it until I'm gone because I don't want credit for it. So Ken had all these stories from Red, and he never published them. After Red passed away, he just had them filed away. So he gave me all those stories that had never been written before. And so we included those in the book. And, it tells the story about how when Red was 16 years old as a high school player, he had heard about this dominant all-black team called the New York Renaissance. And they were coached by a gentleman named Bobby Douglas. And Red wanted to see them play. So as a 16-year-old high school player, he got on the train by himself, went to Harlem, went to the Harlem Renaissance Ballroom where the New York Rens played their home games, and he bought a ticket. He was the only white person in the building. As a 16-year-old kid, he goes in and he watches the Rens play, and after the game, he manages to get himself into the locker room to meet Bobby Douglas. And he introduces himself, and he said, Coach, could I ask you a couple of strategic questions about this game? And Bobby Douglas said, absolutely. Go ahead. And he said, well, the first half, you're blowing that team out. You're up by 20, and you're playing a man-to-man defense. In the second half, you switch to a zone, and you actually let them come back and tie you up at one point. Well, why didn't you stick with your man-to-man? And he said, Bobby Douglas said, well, let me explain it to you. You see all these guys sitting in this locker room. I have contracts with all of them. I have to pay them. The way I pay them is by selling tickets to the games. You notice that the building was sold out, and I need that money to pay the players. Now, if we beat that team by 30, which we probably could have done, some of those fans aren't going to come back because the game wasn't that exciting. I need those fans to come back. So a 10-point win was more exciting for the fans than a 30-point blowout. And he said, on top of this, I have to make my own schedule, and it's hard to find teams that will play us because we're so dominant. I want that team to schedule us again. If we blow them out by 30, they may not come back to play us. But if it's a 10-point game or a 5-point game, they may foolishly think we have a chance to beat the Rens, so we'll play them again. And I need them to come back and play. And from that point on, Red, as a 16-year-old kid, became good friends with Bobby Douglas, this adult African-American, and they were friends the rest of their lives. And Bobby Douglas, the book tells the stories about how Bobby Douglas helped Red get his various coaching jobs, including indirectly being involved with him getting the Celtics job and drafting Chuck Cooper. So there's a lot of stories in there about all the behind-the-scenes things that happened. Just want to help try to educate people about what happened.
Pete, what an incredible story. We're going one-on-one with Pete Babcock, veteran NBA executive, author. His brand new book, it is titled Courts of Justice. You explore basketball, how it intersects with the civil rights and social change. And so I just wonder for you personally, Pete, when did you see that the sport would serve as a catalyst for broader conversations, must-need conversations in society?
Well, it became apparent right away that as when I got into the NBA, it was primarily an African American business. And I fortunately got a chance to become friends with Red when I was coaching with Paul Silas, and spent a lot of time with him, just one-on-one, picking his brain, his philosophy and all this. And so, I listened carefully to all the things Red said. And Red had the courage to not only draft the first African-American, but then the NBA had this unwritten quota system of, only a certain number of blacks per team. And it kept changing over time from no more than 2 blacks per team to 3 to 4. But then there was also an unwritten rule. You didn't start all your black players. Well, Red broke that norm and was the first to start 5 black players. And then he named Bill Russell as the head coach as the first African-American coach in the NBA. So he broke a lot of barriers and did things behind the scenes that I was really impressed with that he didn't know any credit for. And it was obvious that the game was such a great vehicle for bringing people together. Paul Silas told me one time that the most successful teams, the championship teams he played on, were the most diverse teams. The diversity in terms of they had players not only black and white, but you had players with different religions. You had players with different geographical backgrounds, rural players, urban players, just people that had all kinds of different interests. And he said, to him, those are the most successful teams, the ones with the greatest diversity. So we just tried to find ways to utilize the game with each team I was with. To how can you? I'll give you a quick example. When I was in Denver, we had a huge gang problem that developed in the 1980s, and I remember sitting in my office thinking, like, what can we do to help stop some of the violence between the gangs? And so I went into the gang community in the daytime and started asking questions about, is there somebody here in this community who has the respect of all the various gang members? And they said, yeah, there's a guy named Leon Kelly, and he's well respected by everybody. He's an ex-con who's devoted his life to helping stop violence with young people. So I got to meet with Leon, and I asked Leon, I said, well, how do you do this? And he said, well, every night I walk through the neighborhoods and try to stop anything that might be breaking out. And I said, well, can I walk with you? And he looked at me like I was a little bit crazy, and was like, are you sure you want to do this? Mm-hmm. And I said, well, yeah, I feel like I'd be safe. I'm with you. And so I would, once a week, I'd walk with him through the neighborhoods. And this is before cell phones and things. And it was really interesting because as we approached a group of young men, you could see this wall up because they would see me coming as this white guy, in their neighborhood. And it's like this, you could see this wall up where they were really pretty defensive until Leon said, hey, I want to introduce you to the general manager of the Denver Nuggets. And then the wall went down. And they, then they wanted to talk basketball. They wanted to talk about our players and the NBA. And so that helped right away. It was teaching me that the game could be this vehicle to help reach out. So then I said to Leon, well, after several months of walking with him in the evenings at night, I said, here's the next step, Leon. I want you to bring opposing gang members to our games and sit with me courtside, and I want to expose them to another side of life. So they would come to the arena. We'd have dinner in a restaurant at the arena, take them in the locker room to visit all the guys before the game, sit with me during the games. And we had some good outcomes where season ticket holders that sat around me got to know some of these kids and actually offered them jobs working in their companies. So there's an example of how the game became this vehicle to reach these kids and help some of them, improve their lives. And so we tried to look for every vehicle we could, or every avenue we could where we could use the game to reach people.
Pete Babcock, author of Courts of Justice, sharing stories and lessons from his remarkable journey in his new book, just a powerful reflection on leadership basketball and the role, the game of basketball, how it can play in just advancing and bringing people together. Now, listen, we're winding down our time. We're up against the clock, but I got to ask you, we've got the NBA playoffs starting up soon. And so your teams, when we look over your body of work, your teams were regular participants each spring. And out of all the seasons, who did you feel, let's go back to the 80s. Which team do you feel had the best shot of perhaps knocking off Boston back in the 80s?
Oh, boy. Well, the best team, the team that I was with, you mean?
Yeah.
Okay. Oh, well, the Denver Nuggets, because we were an overachieving team. And we actually, because of Doug Moe's innovative system of this we didn't run set plays. We ran a wide open passing game, and we had players who bought into it 100%. And we had Alex English and Fat Lever and Dan Issel and Calvin Natt and Bill Hanslick and Wayne Cooper. We had just a really good overachieving team. We went against the Lakers in the Western Conference Finals in the 84-85 season, but we weren't talented enough to be at the Lakers and Boston's level. However, during the 6 years I was there, I think we beat the Lakers and Boston more than any other team in the NBA during that stretch, not with our talent, but our just system was so unique. And our guys played it so well, but we weren't at that talent level because they both, LA was Showtime, and the Celtics from the mid '80s. You could argue their '86 team was as good as any team that's ever played in the NBA. So I don't know if anybody was going to beat them, but it was fun trying to.
Absolutely. Hey, we are winding down our time. Just time for one more question. My producer and I, we got to ask you. I was at Oklahoma when Mookie Blaylock was there. He was a senior. I was a freshman. He is one of your former players. And do you feel like he was kind of largely overlooked as a great player in his own regard during his time in the NBA? I mean, Mookie was really special.
Yeah, he was. And I think he was one of the underrated players of his time. We were retooling the team, and we traded Ramil Robinson for Mookie, and worked out great for us. Then we had Stacey Augmon. And so the combination of Mookie and Stacey together defensively, we had a terrific defensive backcourt. Those two guys could shut people down, and Mookie had such quick hands and feet, and he was an outstanding defender, and he could make 3-point shots. And he definitely was one of the underrated players of that era.
Pete, thank you so much for your time. This has been a fascinating conversation. I want to encourage all of our listeners out there to go out and get a copy of his new book. It is titled Courts of Justice, and it is truly, just listening to Pete talk, it's more than a basketball story. It is a reflection on leadership, courage, and the lasting impact the game of basketball can have on people and on communities. Great work, continued success. And Pete, let us know when you're in Texas, okay? We'd love to meet. Thank you.
Thank you very much. I appreciate the time.
Absolutely.